upcoming session, Opportunities in Aerospace, Defense and Marine for the Indian Value Chain. And to chair this panel, I request Mr. Rahul K. Mathur, Aerospace Defense Marine Segment TE Connectivities Director, to kindly come onto the dais. And we have Mr. R.M. Bhatia, Executive Director, Reliance Defense and Engineering Company Limited. And Mr. Ashwini Bhargava, Director, Supplier Management, Boeing India International, as our keynote speakers. And now I request Mr. Rahul K. Mathur to take over.
Good evening, everybody. Welcome to the session on opportunities in aerospace, defense, and marine for the Indian value chain. We have a really exciting panel over here who are going to give us an insight into the marine market as well as aerospace, both civil and defense. So the session is going to be about an hour long. We're going to introduce the keynote speakers for today. We're going to then just have a small overview about what the market is like and what could be the key things to keep in mind while the keynote speakers are talking. Following that, we'll have a presentation by Rear Admiral Bhatia and then a question answer session. After that, we'll have Mr. Ashwini Bhargava to give his keynote speech, and again a question answer session. So it's going to be an exciting session, really getting into the meat of what it is that we can look for and where we can participate and play in this space that we are all excited about. So I'd like to introduce first, the first speaker for today will be Rear Admiral Bhatia. He's had a distinguished career of 50 years, and what's extremely interesting is today is the day that he has completed 50 years, in a career of 50 years. So congratulations, sir, and we're honored to have you with us today. So Rear Admiral Bhatia currently is the Executive Director of Reliance Defense and Engineering division that has been acquired by Reliance. It was earlier called Pipava. Following that, we would have Mr. Ashwini Bhargava, who heads the India Boeing supply chain, both on the commercial side as well as on the defense side. And he will deliver his keynote session following that. So we thank you for agreeing to be part of this, and really look forward to your sessions. So just as a context and background, to look at the opportunities that we see in the marine, defense, and aerospace segment. So this is how the market looks from the spend point of view. The key area for us is related to the capex, which is new acquisitions that we have in that. So one of the things that is a fact in this industry that we all talk about is the fact that there's about 70% of the needs of the defense forces that are being met by imports. And how do we move the needle on that has been a topic that has been debated and discussed. And how do we? That's an area that again all of us need to reflect on and work on in terms of moving that. The second is related to we are seeing a lot of activity and JVs being formed in India. If you open the newspaper, we see every day a news article about one of the global companies tying up over here. So with the new DPP and the push for privatization, maybe that's the solution. That's one of the solutions in terms of how we can look at bridging the gap of our defense needs. And us as an electronics and software industry, one of the key trends globally is content on platforms. And more and more, when you look at newer platforms, the content of electronics and software requirements is increasing. So that's a multiplier effect on top of the growth that the industry is going to see. And it also becomes a challenge for us in terms of how do we then keep up with the ever-changing needs and being at the cutting edge. So we know some of the challenges. I think in the last day or so we have heard some of these challenges. We know that offsets was an area that there's a huge potential, but on the ground there's been relatively slow in terms of movement on that. I think today from Ashwani we'll probably get a perspective on what he thinks of offset, what are the challenges faced by us over there, and how can we overcome those challenges. The other point I wanted to talk about is while our industry, and especially in the defense industry, is very cyclical and it's still unpredictable. So how do we build our business models around that is going to be a key area for us, and it's something that we need to make sure that when we make our plans, we consider that. After the fact, it's always easy to complain about how the industry is, but that's the reality. So taking off from some of the challenges that we have, so here's a slide that shows what is called AON, which is acceptance of necessity. This is the stage where the requirement of the services is accepted by the government. And one of the things that you will notice is that there's year-on-year significant ups and downs, both in terms of quantity and value. So that is a challenge that we then face when we are looking at our revenues, our pipelines of growth, the kind of resources that we put over there. The second is timelines for awards. So it can be really, really wrong. And I think Rear Admiral Bhatia will talk a little bit about some of the projects that are there on the marine sector and what are the timelines that are required in that. The third is sometimes while these categories are defined, they're competing platforms as well, which could be buy global, for example. And so while we get in and invest into these projects, we have to always keep in mind that that we have to be the platforms could compete at a later time with some of the global platforms. So while these are the challenges, I think there are models available and ways of mitigating some of these challenges, and it's important that we look at this reality when we are building our business models and to take care of them. Another key area that's happening is the private sector being opened up, and also where we are on the value chain in that. Ashwani is going to talk more about the value chain, where we are on that, where was auto and where we are currently compared to that, what do we need to do to move up and build our competence. So as industry, as companies, it's important for us to also keep at the back of our mind when we are listening to the presentations, where in that value chain do we want to play and what do we bring to the table. Another point that I wanted to bring up is the long life cycles that are there on platforms. So typically in our industry, it's about 20 plus years that a platform exists. So there are opportunities. When we're looking at these opportunities, we can while we focus a lot on the new platforms, the design and development of the new platforms, there are significant opportunities available in other areas as well, like upgrades. They go through significant upgrades from time to time on major platforms, as well as the maintenance, repair, and overall of these platforms are required. So, therefore, it's important that we understand this value chain, this life cycle, and where we can play and add value to it. So this is the last slide for the background and context. So we I wanted to share and show a known fact, which is that while we are focused on the India market, it's still a very small part of the global market. So if you compare that with countries like USA, Russia, China, so the question then for us to address is, how do we play in those opportunities that are available globally? Is there a way that while we serve the Indian defense needs, we at the same time don't keep an eye on what is there around the globe and get into the global value chain. So Ashwini will later on talk about that and how he looks at the aerospace industry globally and what India has to play, what part India has to play in that. So thank you for that. Thank you very much, and I hope we have a great session. And I'll hand it over now to Rear Admiral Bhatia.